What's going on, Hokie Nation? Welcome into your Week 2 edition of everybody's favorite show, Buy or Sell. Nick Brown producing behind the scenes, Will Stewart in the fourth chair on set, Andy Bitter, Chris Coleman. I'm Giovanni Heater, and without further ado, let's get right into it. All right, last week was a little bit disappointing, no doubt about it. Virginia Tech starts on the road 0-1. With that being said, Andy, Chris, and myself cannot be all that disappointed because we got some buy or sell questions right here, and we're tied with 2 correct answers last week. Nobody had a great week, but 2 correct answers for the lead with the 3-way tie.
When I was covering Auburn, their basketball team, when their leading scorers left, and it was their leading scorer on the team, we're asking the coach, Tony Barbie, we're like, are you concerned that the leading scorer just left the team? He's like, every team has the leading scorer. It's like, yeah, that's a good point. Even really terrible teams. So even a really terrible buy or sell has a leading scorer after week 1. And it's the 3 guys up here in the Rays set.
There we go. That's a good way to look at it right there. Let's go over those results from last week. So drones 3 or more touchdowns obviously did not happen. Everybody bought it. So everyone got that one wrong. Bayshul Tootin 80 or more rushing yards. Everybody bought it. Everybody got that one wrong. Offense, 175 or more rushing yards. Andy bought it. Chris bought it. David bought it. Nick Brown bought it. Will Stewart bought it. The fans bought it. They all got it wrong. I sold it. I sat up here feeling like a moron after everybody gave their explanation as to why they bought it. And I was like, geez, that's unfortunate. I'm going to get that one wrong. And I'm a silly goose for picking them to sell. And then they didn't get it. So I ended up being in a 3-way tie because I sold that one, was the only one to do it, and somehow got it right. The defense, 2 or more turnovers. Everybody sold it except Nick and Will. They bought it. The defense did not create 2 or more turnovers, so Nick and Will did not get that one right. And then Vanderbilt, 300 or more total yards. Andy and Chris ended up buying that one. David, myself, Nick, Will, and the fans all sold it. And then Andy and Chris ended up getting that one right. So
unofficially, did we have a first half screen passes at like 15.5? Is that what the number was on that? Because that probably would have hit. I didn't go back and count them, but it probably would have hit.
Well, we also had one that didn't end up being true, and we had Will wanted us to just talk about it. Would it be over, I think, half Virginia Tech fans? And it was. It was well over half.
I think
Virginia
it was,
Tech fans.
yeah.
So that was pretty cool.
I would have had to admit defeat there, but it was an unofficial pick. Does not count in the standings, so let's don't even put it in there.
I think you also set a line that was like my birthday drink total at a certain number.
I think I set that one.
I think you set it at 13.5, and I'm sorry, Chris, you weren't even close.
If I'd been
that
there,
was before I knew that they were serving the 16-ounce beers
16 ounces
at that place. So that's that would have changed the equation, I think.
Yeah.
If I'd been there, you would have set that over, buddy.
Not only that, but it wasn't a full day, right? By the time the game was over and the work was done, the day was
you had all
nearly gone. It's fair. It's fair. All right, let's get into to this upcoming week. So just to one more time recap, Will and Nick ended up going 0 for 5. Come on, guys. We got to step up the game a little bit. Andy, Chris, and myself, we got 2 of them right. We have a tie for first, and then David ended up getting 1 right. So he's definitely in the mix, and the fans ended up getting 1 right as well. Thank you for that.
I'm feeling like we're going to be like, somebody's going to win the division with like a 7-9 record.
NFC
East. Go to the
East.
playoffs.
You know, banners fly forever. It doesn't matter. All you see is the Seahawks won the division that one year that they hosted that game.
There we go. All right, so for the Marshall answers, our lines sit at this. Hokies cover at 20.5. 2 and 2 or more touchdowns. Gosnell brothers, 100 or more yards, tag team. That's a fun one. Tech gets 3 or more sacks. And Marshall, 125 or more rushing yards. Let's start with the Hokies to cover, and we'll start with the man himself, Will Stewart, our founder.
Well, first of all, let me take a chance to tell you that Buy or Sell is sponsored by the Robertson and Cox Real Estate Team. This sponsorship is a layup. If you're looking to buy or sell a home, contact the R&C team. In particular, they want your listing. List your home with them, and your property will be advertised to tens of thousands of TSL site visitors and social media followers. Plus, you'll get a free year of Tech Sideline, some cool swag, and our undying gratitude. Visit rncteam.com to learn more, and we'll drop a link in the video description as well. Now, I am buying the Hokies to cover because, as we've discussed on the podcast, I have plenty of Kool-Aid left. Spread is 20.5, and I picked the Hokies 34-13, and that just barely covers.
All right.
As I mentioned on the previous pod, I'm selling this one. I think a lot has to go right. I think it has to go out how you expect this game to play out for the Hokies to win by 3+ touchdowns. You know, a week after you lose to Vanderbilt against a team that you did lose to last year. I'm just not quite confident that they have everything going in the right direction right now, or will do play from start to finish the way they should. And I thought it was interesting. I always like to look at the SP Plus rankings because they project margins when looking at different things, and they actually have this game at 10.9 points, which would be less than even what the original line was when it came out at 14 originally. So when it gets to be that big, and it's one of the biggest differences between the actual spread and the projected win margin with SP Plus, and then I start to get a little iffy about it. So I'm going to go, they do not cover this 20.5 point line.
I'm going to sell because we know so little about Marshall. For all I know, and I could see this happening, I could see Marshall not being any good at all and Virginia Tech just cleaning house, right? But we know so little about them. And they did beat Virginia Tech last week. They're going to have confidence because they beat Tech last year and they know Tech lost last week. So I got it sell, but I could definitely see it going the other way.
I ended up buying this one. I picked them to win 35-14, giving them a 21-point win pretty much on the dot to cover by literally a half a point. Nick Brown ended up buying this one. He agreed with me. He had this blowout win conjured up in his head. What was it? 45-13. There you go. 45-13. Nick thinks they're going to win. And then the fans ended up selling this one. They do not think that the Hokies will cover the 20.5 point spread.
No, you got David's pick there too, right?
And yeah, that's right. David's not here. He sold it. Thank you for the reminder. David sold that one as well. 2 or more touchdowns. We'll work in reverse order and go back to Chris.
I bought it. I think Virginia Tech will run the football this week. And obviously he's an effective passer too. He's also their kickoff return guy. So he's going to touch the ball 3 different ways this week. And it's going to be against the defense that I don't think we'll be able to stop him if Virginia Tech, if everybody around him plays well and coaches well. So I'm going by.
Yeah, he has hit this number 4 of the last 5 games. Going back to last year, he had 2 obviously against Vanderbilt, 2 in the bowl game, had the kick return against UVA and 1 rushing as well. And BC, before that, 3 rushing touchdowns in that game. The one game he didn't was against NC State, where he had 2 carries. So when they use him, he typically scores. He has a good nose for the end zone, and I think he'll get back there this week. I think they'll use him. So I bought this one.
Well, what you got?
Yeah, I'm buying that one as well. I mean, the Tech did not have a great game offensively against Vanderbilt, and yet he still had 2 touchdowns. And as Chris pointed out, he can get you lots of different ways. So I'm buying.
All right, we'll go ahead and take a look at what everybody else did. David ended up buying this one. Nick Brown ended up buying this one. The fans, they sold this one, and I sold this one as well. 2 touchdowns is tough. If there's anybody besides Kyron Drones to get 2 touchdowns in a game, it is Bashal Tutin, in my opinion, especially because he can run and receive the football. Had one last week that was kind of impressive with the 24-yard run. I don't know, just gut feeling. I don't think he gets 2. Taking a look at what he did last year, like there were games, especially early in the season, where he was at Marshall, a non-factor almost in the ball game. So gut feeling, I think he gets 1. I don't think he gets to 2.
If he's a non-factor in this ball game, I'm going to be highly disappointed.
Can we get a rant then? Can we light the set on fire then?
I promise you get a rant.
There we go. The Gosnell brothers, I like this line a lot. Did they tag team for 100 or more yards? We'll start with Andy.
I sold this one. This is a lot of yards. I know they looked good last week. Benji's making his 3rd, 4th start, something like that, in his career here. 61 yards last week, I think it was. Just don't know if they can combine that at the same time. There's so many receiving options. I think they're going to spread it out. Would not have hit this number last week if not for that long pass to Steven over the top, and I don't think you're going to hit those on every single week. So I sold this one.
Me next? Okay,
yeah, we'll go to you.
I sold it also. In Virginia Tech's, I think Virginia Tech's going to win this weekend. And in Virginia Tech's 6 wins under Kyron Drones, they only attempt an average of 22 passes per game. And their 5 losses last year with Drones as a starter, they attempted an average of 29 passes per game. And that number's a little bit higher now after last week because they attempted 33. Point being, when Virginia Tech wins, they don't throw the ball all that much. Like, to win, Virginia Tech has to run the football. They have to establish that run. They have to be run heavy and then pass off the run. So I think Virginia Tech's going to win this week, and they'll have a successful running game, and that will limit the passing receptions.
Not going to have to throw if you're not playing from behind. Will, what do you think?
I'm also selling it. I just think that Steven in particular will be crowded out by the other wide receivers, Felton, Lane, and Jennings. And then you'll get some action to Tootin out of the backfield. So they targeted the tight end a fair amount last week. And if Benji catches all of those, he might get some yardage. But like I said, I think this week Steven gets crowded out by the other wide receivers, and that's what will keep him from getting to 100.
All right. The fans agreed with you guys. They sold this one. Nick Brown agreed. He sold this one. David bought it, and I myself bought it as well. I know they kind of popped off last week. They did hit over 100 last week combined. I kind of lean on that, but more so what I'm looking at here is Benji Gosnell. I don't know if anybody on the other side, you think Marshall, a little bit more undersized. It's not Power 4 football. I don't know if anybody physically can kind of hang with him. And Kyron seemed to really almost depend on him last week. He found him in some bigger moments, more so than arguably anybody else. And Benji dropped a touchdown. Ended up being a 24-yard touchdown run for Bashal Tootin instead.
And then Tootin scored instead.
On the next play.
Right.
So that would have been huge in this week's by yourself.
I mean, they would have had like 170 or something. So yeah, that would have been game changing. So with that being said, him dropping the touchdown, I think Benji kind of carries the load there, and they do end up getting over 100. Tech gets 3 or more sacks. We'll start with me, but we'll start with Nick and David and myself, our answers. David bought it. Nick ended up buying this one. He thinks they get 3 or more. The fans sold it. They don't think Tech gets 3 or more. I bought it. I think Tech does get 3. Originally, I had put this line at 4. I thought it was a little high. And then Nick chimed in and was like, let's take it down to 3. We think we'll get more of a variance in answers here. So we took it down to 3. I buy it. I think they get 3. What do you guys think?
I bought it. I think Virginia Tech will take a lead, and they'll play with a lead. Marshall will have to throw it a little bit more on top of if they're leaning towards air raid anyway. So that's my reasoning.
Fair.
They had 2 last week, but Vandy didn't throw it all that much, and they moved the pocket a lot. I mean, Tech didn't have a lot of chances for sacks last week just because of Vandy's scheming and play calling. But I think they'll have some more chances this week.
Yeah, I bought it. I think more opportunity, like you said. I mean, they had 2 against what was effectively an option team last week. So they were still getting in the backfield and getting after them. I think with more opportunities, they'll get up to 3.
Will, what you got?
I am selling it, and I couldn't tell you why.
Hey, that worked for me last week.
Well, yeah, and knowing that they run the air raid offense, typically that offense gets it out quick. Chris is right. They're going to throw it a lot, especially if they get behind. But that's my rationale. I think they'll get it out quick and will not suffer the sacks.
You know what we should have thrown in here and we didn't? Last week we had... I think we had 2 or more turnovers forced by the defense. This is a team that threw over 18 interceptions last year, and they had multiple They never had a quarterback that threw more touchdowns than interceptions last season. Granted, the quarterback room looks a little different, but I think I would have bought 3 or more turnovers maybe at that point if we're talking interceptions. Let's go Marshall, 125 or more rushing yards. We'll start it with Andy.
I wrote buy on this one, and I'm having buyer's remorse, especially after we talked it out on the previous podcast. I'm like, man, they really do have air raid offense and throw it a lot more. So I'm locked in with buy. So I guess we'll roll with it.
Hey, Gio, don't even come over here because everything he just said, I echo that. I bought it, and I have no idea why.
Will bought it.
I sold it not because of Marshall's offense, but I sold it because I think Virginia Tech's going to get the lead and play with the lead, and Marshall will have to throw the football. And
that makes sense, too. I should have used that reason.
I'm with Chris. I sold it. Chris and I were the only ones to sell it.
Maybe everybody gets one mulligan at the end of the year.
I don't know about that. We'll see too. You know what's going to be interesting is at the end of the year when the preseason ones factor in? Because, like, what if somebody has a lead and then the preseason ones, somebody gains that ground and takes it back because we have those 5 to factor in as well. But I also sold it. Chris and I were the only ones. Nick bought it. David bought it, and the fans bought this one. They think Marshall will have 125 or more rushing yards. So, in totality, when you look at all across the board, the majority of us think that Virginia Tech will not cover 4-3. 2 and 2 or more touchdowns. Everybody thinks that they'll have it except myself and the fans. Gosnell brothers, majority of us sold it. Just 2 people bought it. It was David and myself for 100 and more yards from the Gosnells. 3 or more sacks. We had 5 buys, and it came from Andy, Chris, David, myself, and Nick. Will and the fans sold that one, and then Marshall 125 or more yards. Chris and I were the only ones to sell. Should be a fun week, guys. No doubt about it. What is everyone's game plans before we wrap up? Who's doing what at the ball game? Chris, you're going back in lane.
Yep.
Sweet. Will, tailgates like crazy?
Yeah, friends coming into town. Looking forward to it.
I've got to figure out where my seats are. I know where they are. It's the section formerly known as Section 3. I just don't remember what that section
number
is.
that is,
called.
yeah.
Do you have a seat back?
I don't know. Good question.
Are you a
Do I?
season ticket holder, Chris?
I have season tickets, yeah.
Very nice. Well, Andy, we'll see you. I'll be down on the field. I'll get the game footage. Hopefully, because we'll have some footage, we can throw some footage into the podcast next week. So that'll be something fun to play with for Nick. And he'll be up in the press box. Nick will be out in the seats. So I think that wraps things up for buy or sell. We'll see how the results continue to play out. For Nick Brown, Will Stewart, Andy Bitter, Chris Coleman, I'm Giovanni Heater. We'll talk to you next week.